The rain had been falling since dawn, thin and steady, slicing down the windows like tears too exhausted to pour. I sat in the armchair by the window, wrapped in a gray cardigan that had once belonged to my husband, staring out at the courtyard of Sycamore Hills nursing home. The roses we planted last spring bowed under the weight of the water, their color dulled by time and weather. I used to love the rain. Now it only made everything feel quieter. They say when you grow old, people stop seeing you. But I didn't expect it to happen so gradually, so thoroughly. First, the neighbors stopped inviting me to potlucks. Then the grocery clerk started calling me ma'am without making eye contact. And eventually, even my own son began to speak to me like I was a task to check off between work meetings. Nathaniel used to call every Sunday without fail, then every other week. Then it was just birthdays and Mother's Day, the kind of calls that always came with a text first. Can I call around 3? As if love had to be penciled in. A knock tapped lightly on my door, breaking the quiet. Mrs. Marin came, a soft voice. I turned to see Rosa, one of the younger nurses, peeking in with a clipboard pressed to her chest. Her scrubs were wrinkled and her smile was kind, but rushed. You missed breakfast, she said gently. We were a little worried. At 75, I think I've earned the right to skip oatmeal if I want to, I replied. Rosa laughed, a short breath of relief. I'll mark you down as appetite variable. Let me know if you want anything brought up later. Thank you, dear. After she left, the silence returned with force. The room smelled of lavender disinfectant and thyme. On my nightstand, a photo of Nate as a boy grinned at me, missing front teeth, arms around our old Labrador eyes that once lit up when I entered the room. I reached over and turned the frame face down. The quiet was easier to bear that way. Across the room, a letter sat unopened on my dresser. Thick envelope with a lawyer's seal. It had arrived yesterday and bore a name I hadn't heard in nearly 2 decades. I didn't open the envelope right away. I moved it from the dresser to the nightstand, then to the drawer. I even tucked it between the pages of an old gardening book Rex once gave me for Christmas. But it kept finding its way back to the surface, pressing against my attention like a slow pulse I couldn't ignore. On Thursday morning, I finally did. It was late past the breakfast rush, and the hallway outside my room was quiet. I sat at the edge of my bed, with the envelope in my lap. The return address belonged to a law firm I didn't recognize. The name, printed in neat serif letters beneath it, hit me like a cold wind. Margaret Caro. My sister, my only sibling, and someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 20 years. The last time we were in the same room, our voices had cracked open a decade of resentment. A fight over our father's will had turned into something bigger, childhood slights, grown-up grudges, all tangled into a single afternoon that ended with slammed doors and silence. We never patched it. Time didn't soften us, it hardened the distance. The knock at my door came just as I was setting the letter down again. A woman stood there, mid-50s. Gray blazer, polite smile. She introduced herself as Camden Lynn attorney with Taylor, Royce, and Wynn, representing my late sister's estate. The room felt smaller. She passed 3 weeks ago, she said gently. Lung cancer. It was fast. I sat down before I realized my knees had weakened. Camden opened a folder and slid a sealed letter across the table, followed by a printed statement. Margaret had left behind her remaining savings, $300,000 in cash, designated entirely to me. No conditions, no stipulations. Just a final letter in her handwriting, with an apology I hadn't known I needed. I read it that night by lamplight. Her words were sharp and honest, just like she'd always been. But behind them was something I hadn't expected: remorse. She wrote of years wasted, of silence stretched too long. And near the end, one line stuck with me. Use this for something that sets you free. I couldn't, but maybe you still can. By morning, I'd made my decision. I wouldn't mail a check. I would carry it myself. I arrived on a Wednesday afternoon unannounced, exactly as I'd planned. The cab pulled up to their driveway just after 2, the autumn sun hanging low over the manicured hedges and spotless white porch railings. Nate's house looked like it belonged in a magazine-symmetrical window's flower beds, without a single weed, everything just so. The driver set my suitcase down on the front step. Inside it, beneath layers of neatly folded sweaters and prescription bottles, was a cloth-wrapped bundle, $150 in cash, tucked into the secret compartment I hadn't touched since the year Rex and I traveled to Vancouver. We'd built the compartment ourselves just in case something happened overseas. Back then we called it our safety plan. I supposed in a different way it still was. I rang the bell, heart thudding, unsure what I expected. A warm hug, a surprised smile, maybe just a second of genuine happiness. Nate opened the door, eyebrows lifting in shock. "Mom," his voice cracked slightly, and then he stepped forward to hug me. "You should have called. I would have picked you up." "I wanted to surprise you," I said, holding on a moment longer than he did. "I had a few days free." He took the suitcase from my hand and groaned with theatrical flair. "What do you have in here, Bricks?" "Only the essentials." I smiled. "Comfortable shoes. A book or two. Nothing too heavy." Camilla appeared behind him, wiping her hands on a linen dish towel. Her makeup was perfect, not a hair out of place. "Eloise," she said, offering a brief hug that smelled of perfume and restraint. "What a surprise." "I hope I'm not intruding," I said, stepping into the entryway. The marble floors gleamed. A vase of white lilies sat on a lacquered sideboard. Everything felt curated, impersonal, like a showroom. "Of course not," she said. "We're happy to have you. I'll get the guest room ready." I followed Nate upstairs, trying not to wince with each step. The house was quiet, too quiet for something called a home. The guest room was spotless, impersonal, and cold. No photos, no books, just soft bedding and a distant view of the trimmed hedges below. As he set my suitcase down beside the bed, he smiled and said, "Make yourself comfortable." Camilla's voice floated up from the kitchen. "Dinner in an hour." Dinner was served at the far end of a long dining table that could have seated 10, though only 3 places were set. Camilla had ordered in Italian, she said, because she hadn't had time to cook. Nate poured wine, careful not to overfill my glass, and asked about the nursing home as if we were catching up after a long vacation, not years of drift. I answered politely, choosing my words the way I'd once folded my linens, smooth, neat, familiar. I told them about the book club I'd started, about Paul the receptionist and his terrible chess strategies, about the women who argued over lemon bars every Tuesday. It was a performance, and I knew they were grateful for it. Camilla nodded and smiled in all the right places, but her eyes never softened. She pushed food around her plate and checked her phone twice under the table. Nate tried harder. He laughed at my stories, asked follow-up questions, even teased me gently like he used to. But something about the way his eyes flicked toward Camilla with each new subject unsettled me. After dinner, they insisted I rest while they cleared the dishes. I thanked them and returned to the guest room, pretending fatigue. I didn't close the door completely. Camilla's voice carried down the hall from the kitchen, low at first, then sharper. "I told them we'd pay next month." "I've said that 3 times now." "No, don't tell Nate. He's stressed already. I'm doing my best. They need to wait until the bonus clears." There was a pause. Then her voice dropped further. "We're already juggling 3 loans. I can't keep this up if they push again." The words hit me like a cold wind. I sat still on the bed, hands folded in my lap. The house was beautiful, yes, but the beauty looked thinner now, more like a shell than something rooted. I thought of the vase in the entryway, how carefully it was placed, how easily it could crack. Later that evening, Camilla was back to offering chamomile tea and asking about my favorite soaps. Her tone was light practiced, but I couldn't unhear what I'd heard. As I lay in bed that night, I stared at the ceiling and tried to quiet the thrum in my chest. I couldn't sleep. The room was too quiet, too foreign. Even the sheets smelled unfamiliar, like synthetic lavender and something faintly metallic. I got up once to check my suitcase. The compartment was still sealed, the money untouched, but the instinct to look had come unbidden. I couldn't shake the feeling that something in this house pressed against me like a shadow, just out of view. Around midnight, I heard voices. I assumed the TV was on until Camilla's tone rose above a murmur. I moved carefully, easing open the bedroom door just an inch. Their study door was ajar, light pouring into the hallway like a wedge. "She's hiding something," Camilla said, sharp and low. "Did you see the way she guards that suitcase? She won't even unpack it. Who brings a suitcase and doesn't settle in?" "Cam?" "Stop," Nate said, sounding tired. "It's her clothes. Her medicine." "No," she snapped. "I went in while you were out. It's locked." "Who locks their suitcase at their own son's house?" There was silence. Then Camilla again, quieter now. "What if it's money? What if she's been sitting on a stash this whole time and just showed up to decide where it goes?" I stepped back slightly. Breath caught. Nate exhaled. "Even if she has money, it's hers. You can't just—" "We're drowning," she cut in. "The mortgage is behind. Credit cards are maxed. My studio is weeks from defaulting. If we don't figure this out, we're done." "She won't just hand it over," Nate muttered. "Then make her want to," Camilla said. "Tell her we're having a baby. Or that you've got a health scare. Give her a reason. Mothers love to rescue their sons." A pause. "If she won't help, then we suggest something practical, like moving her to a state-run facility. Sell the idea of downsizing. Say it's better for her." "She's 75, Nate. How many years do you think she really has left?" I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Nate didn't argue. Not once. When I finally closed the door and returned to bed, my hands were shaking. I laid awake the rest of the night, staring at the dark window, listening to the soft tick of a clock I hadn't noticed before. By morning, the decision had already taken root. I moved through the motions of the day like a woman rehearsing someone else's lines. Breakfast was polite, filled with shallow questions and shallow smiles. Camilla asked if I needed anything from the store. Nate offered to drive me to the bank later in the week if I needed to check on anything. I smiled, nodded, thanked them both. But inside, I was already halfway gone. When they retired for the night, I waited in silence. No TV, no tea, just time stretching itself across the evening like a taut string. I repacked my suitcase slowly, layering the sweaters in reverse order, checking the latch on the hidden compartment 3 times. The money was still there. I'd counted it the night before in the bathroom, one bundle at a time, under the soft whir of the ceiling fan. I changed into loose pants and a soft sweater, the kind Rex used to call my travel clothes. My coat, folded neatly at the bottom of the closet, still held the scent of the last time I'd worn it. Autumn Airbus diesel, the faintest trace of cinnamon, from a bakery I'd passed downtown. At 1:17 a.m., I called the cab. The driver responded quickly. 15 minutes. I waited until the last possible moment to open the door. Every creak in the hallway floor made my chest seize. I moved like a ghost through that house, past the guest room, the staircase. The photos on the walls, none of them with me in them. At the front door, I paused, breathing in the stillness, my fingers already curled around the handle of my suitcase. I didn't leave a note. I didn't owe them that. Outside, the night air bit at my skin. The driveway was lit only by the faint glow of the porch light. The cab rolled up, headlights slicing through the quiet. I gave my name, loaded the suitcase myself, and slid into the back seat without looking back. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Bus station," I said. As we pulled away, I looked once more at the house that had never really opened itself to me, that now receded behind us like a bad memory, dissolving into mist. Maureen opened her front door in a faded bathrobe and slippers, her hair pulled into the same haphazard bun she wore in college. She didn't ask questions right away, just took one look at me, reached for my suitcase, and said, "You're staying in the guest room." No arguing. Inside, her small bungalow smelled like chamomile and wood polish. We sat in the kitchen with mugs of tea, the steam curling between us. I told her everything slowly at first, and then all at once. About the inheritance, about the plan to share it, about what I'd overheard. Her face never changed. No interruptions, no disbelief. Just a steady presence across the table. "I always thought Camilla was a climber," she said finally. "Didn't know Nate would let himself be pulled up her ladder." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The silence between us had always been the comfortable kind. By the next day, Maureen had called Susan and Evelyn, two women I'd known through her, but never spent much time with. They came over with a coffee cake and strong opinions. We sat around Maureen's dining table, while I explained again this time, with fewer pauses. Susan offered practical ideas. Evelyn asked the sharp questions I hadn't dared voice aloud. Maureen kept refilling my teacup. They didn't flinch when I told them the number. They didn't blink at the suitcase. They didn't make me feel like a fool. By afternoon, we had a list of options and a plan to visit a new senior residence the next town over. One with good reviews, privacy, and doors that locked. Later that evening, as we sat in the living room, watching the fire settle into coals, I realized I'd smiled for the first time in days. Not because someone expected it. Not because I needed to make peace, but because I felt safe. Maureen passed me a blanket, and I tucked it around my legs without thinking. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Some people don't wait for permission to love you. They just do. Shorepine Haven sat on a quiet bluff above the coast, the kind of place that didn't advertise itself loudly. Maureen and I walked the grounds in silence, while the others waited inside. Wind brushed against the low shrubs and wildflowers along the path, and for the first time in days, I felt something close to calm. The apartment was small but filled with light, with a view of the sea and space enough for books, a reading chair, and quiet mornings. Vanessa, the woman from the front desk, showed us around without a trace of pity in her voice. I liked her immediately. By the end of the visit, I'd signed the lease and paid the first year up front. I moved deliberately, like someone building a wall that would hold. The bank visit came next, a new account under my full name with a password that only I knew. Half the money went in. The rest stayed in cash, divided between a lockbox and a hidden drawer in my new apartment. Evelyn had suggested leaving a note behind, just enough to keep Nate from filing reports or sending police. I wrote it in neat, slow handwriting. Gone to visit a friend. I'm well. Will reach out soon. It was vague but believable. We all agreed it was the safest way to cut the cord without burning the bridge. Later that night, back at Maureen's, we sat around the fireplace again. I listened to them debate over curtain colors and mattress firmness, like it all mattered, because maybe it did. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was planning a life rather than retreating from one. It didn't erase what had happened, but it reminded me I could still decide what came next. He showed up 10 minutes early alone, just like I'd asked. I watched him through the cafe window before I walked in. He looked thinner than I remembered, like the tension had started to strip something away. When he saw me, he stood quickly, reaching for a hug I didn't return. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, eyes darting to the two women seated beside me, Maureen and Evelyn. Their presence had been non-negotiable. We sat. I let him speak first. "I've been calling," he began. "We didn't know where you were." I was worried. I nodded once. "I heard you. I don't know what you think happened, but Camilla, she was upset. She said things she didn't mean. We were under a lot of pressure. I waited. I never wanted to hurt you, he added. I wouldn't have let anything bad happen. You didn't say a word to stop her, I said. He went quiet. I heard everything, Nate. I heard the lies you planned, the way she spoke about moving me out like I was a burden, and I heard your silence. She doesn't speak for me, he said weakly. But you let her, I replied. He looked down, jaw tight. We were drowning. The house, her business. Everything was slipping. And you reached for me like a lifeline, I said. Not as your mother. As a solution. I made a mistake, he whispered. Evelyn shifted slightly beside me, but didn't speak. Maureen's hand rested gently over mine beneath the table. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded paper. I'm safe now. That's all you need to know. Don't contact me unless you're willing to be honest. He took the paper with a shaking hand. I stood, nodded once, and walked out into the light. The message came a week later. Nate's voice was unsteady on the voicemail, asking for a small loan to cover a final mortgage payment. He said it was just a bridge, just enough to keep them from losing the house. I didn't call back. 2 days after that, another message. This time shorter. Camilla had left. The bank was moving forward. He was sorry. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time before deleting the message. I felt the tug of old instincts, the ones that had kept me up with him as a boy during fevers, the ones that packed lunches and paid tuition, and filled in every gap his father's absence left behind. But instincts didn't change facts. I didn't move into Seaside Haven to escape them. I moved there to reclaim something peace, maybe. Autonomy, dignity. I made tea. I opened the window. Outside, the waves pressed softly against the shore. Maureen was stopping by later with a puzzle, and I'd promised Evelyn I'd join her for the book club meeting. Nate would figure things out, or he wouldn't. That was his burden to carry, not mine. Not anymore. We were sitting on the patio with slices of lemon cake and a brochure spread across our laps when Susan said it. Let's go to Europe. Just us. No excuses this time. Maureen clapped her hands and Evelyn rolled her eyes but didn't say no. We made a list. Paris, Florence, Lisbon. It felt like a game at first, but the longer we talked, the more real it became. I thought of Rex. How we used to dream about Florence after retirement. He'd wanted to see the Duomo. I'd wanted to try real gelato. Life had taken other turns. But now I had a chance to take that trip, not as a consolation, but as my own. That night, just before bed, my phone rang. It was Nate. His voice was quieter, almost unfamiliar. He said he'd left Camilla, sold the house, and was looking for a small apartment near Southport. He didn't ask for anything, just said he wanted to start again. To be better, I told him I'd think about it. Then I hung up, turned off the light, and sat by the window as the tide slipped in and out like breath. The horizon waited steady and wide.